Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good. How are you?
I am good. Everything's good. What's been going on?
I'm already angry. I'm already angry and frustrated because it took me 10 minutes to fucking log on and make the mic work. And I had to get a new fucking mic and
We're not
nothing
going to
ever
be
worked.
anyone's tech support in this century, I don't think.
Right. I just know how to turn things on. And if they go wrong, that's it. Jane went to Brighton once to visit her mum. I couldn't get the telly on. I didn't know what the remotes were doing. I was FaceTime. She's going, no, not that one. Go on to the Sky. I was going, what's the Sky? But why have we got 5 remotes? She went, because I went, oh my God. And then the boiler went. She came home after 2 days. I was on the couch with the cat covered in a blanket, just listening to the radio. It was like,
you
it's
were
like, God,
you were back
2
in the
days.
1940s.
I know.
It's a time machine. Your ineptitude with tech is a veritable time machine.
Honestly, you should see me in. I haven't toured for a couple of years, obviously, and I think hotels took the pandemic as an excuse to rewire everything.
Mhm.
So now there's a lighting system that's like the Starship Enterprise. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying to put the lights out and I'm turning the aircon off and stuff
Right.
like that. And it's just I want to go, what was up with a switch? And oh God, when I get honestly, I am really like an old luddite. I just get to learn something and they change it.
This is the whinging of, if not old age, late middle age.
I know.
This
Definitely.
conversation is aging us. There's no question.
And it's all due to laziness.
Mm.
It's all due to laziness that I never. I know there's someone that can do it better than me, so I just would just do that then. Well, yeah. Talking of evolution of technology, I was thinking about evolution. Okay, and I've got very very early college level biology and evolution. So I assume I know about
Mm.
1% of stuff. But I keep hearing this thing. We even talk about it, and I think I understand it about, group selection
Mhm.
and social evolution and things. Now, most people think of evolution as big changes over millions and millions of years, reptile into bird, etc. But that's usually a mutation, isn't it, that gets picked up? That's like, what does genetic mutation mean? Is it like, the Incredible Hulk gamma rays changed his DNA?
Mhm.
Or do they literally mean just a different combination of two individuals meeting that threw up a. Because I understand that, obviously, that happens all the
Mhm.
time. But can that make the massive changes? Could that create a wing over millions of years? Because you're not changing the gene pool, are you necessarily? What don't I understand? What have I got wrong?
Yeah, well, no, mutation is really pretty close to the Incredible Hulk story. I mean, it is gamma rays, cosmic rays hitting
Right.
DNA and actually causing a base pair change, and that having that occur in the germline and get passed down.
Right.
That's where you get fundamental
And how
changes.
often does that, happen? That must happen lots.
It's happening continuously everywhere, but it's I don't know. I can't actually recall how to summarize the rate at which that's happening. I'm sure it's different in different systems. I mean, depending on
And
how
then
where they
then
are
there's
and
lots
how
of obstacles that it
shielded
has
they
to
are.
happen
Yeah,
in a significant way. It has to be a dominant gene, or it takes, millions of more years. It has to be an advantage, or it can
yeah.
be a dead end. Right.
It can happen faster than is intuitively obvious, right? I mean, we've had we have evolved famously like lactose tolerance in I think the last 5,000 years. So you can get something that is discernible at the level of whole human populations over the course of some thousands of years, and that's what is meant by the mutation-driven evolution, a random mutation in the context of environmental pressure.
Yeah.
Which is not pure randomness, right? People often mistake this for you just there's the religious critique of evolution, purposefully mistakes it for a story of just pure randomness creating complex creatures like ourselves. I mean, that's
So
just like the blind watchmaker argument. If you walked
yeah,
into a field and
yeah.
found a fully functioning watch, you would think this demands the creativity of an intelligent designer. and so too with all the complexity you see in biological systems. But it's not randomness because environmental pressure is a serious ordering function, in
Yeah.
the same way that artificial selection by dog breeders is a serious ordering function.
Well, there we sort of we cheat, don't we? Because we see the phenotype and
Yeah.
we choose it on that and go big ears. Let's get two big ears. Oh, cool, big ears. That
Yeah.
that's
And then
really
then it
fast.
happens, truly with amazing speed.
Yeah,
The
because
time course of
we've cut out the guesswork. We've cut
yeah.
we know we see the aim. We see you never see the aim of evolution. That's usually, but we've worked backwards. I get that, but if you took a sample of I don't know how many would make a big enough gene pool, but say 1,000 of one species, all very similar from and you split them up.
Hmm.
Okay, so they'd basically got both halves have got basically the same gene pool. Is that naive or is that about right? In
Yeah.
terms of the chances, of course, right? So then, and you split them up, so you make a big geographical barrier. Now, that randomness would surely create about the same species. There wouldn't be that you'd need genetic mutation, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Or some form of drastically different set of environments to select differently. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Before you could even see the difference in a million years or something.
Yeah, you take the same species and divide it, and so geographically isolate it, and it's incurring presumably the same background random mutation, but
Right.
in the context of increasingly different selection pressures.
Yeah.
And then all of those
And
changes
so
begin to compound because you've got individuals only from that population mating with one another. There's no
yeah.
cross pollination, and then you get divergent species.
And so you could therefore say that without genetic mutation, and if the geographical barrier was literally a wall where you had the same climate, same selection, there wouldn't be a change in the two gene pools.
If there's no mutation, there's
Mm.
no basis for these phenotypic changes that would be responsive to selection pressure. I mean, it really
And
does
so,
require it. The mutation is the engine of change here.
yeah. So my next question is if we're pretty much in charge of our genetics now, aren't we? Or really getting there.
Mm.
So without that, is human evolution slowing down simply because we control the factors like before we get into playing with genetics, that we to a certain degree control how warm and cold we are, whether we die of hunger or flood, or we control those big things that would make big changes in population. Is there any difference at all in human evolution in the last million years?
The
I know we're only a quarter of a million years old, but you know what I mean? Once we became a society, we should probably say last 100,000 years, shouldn't we really?
Yeah, as I said, even within the last 5,000 years, a few things are clearly evolved traits that still kind of confound us, like lactose tolerance, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
happened under conditions of being able to live in proximity to livestock. That's an innovation where we're drinking the milk of cows and goats and etc. And some people tolerate that well as a food source, and some people don't, and that difference becomes a survival advantage, and the genetics of that get amplified in the population or in certain
So how
populations.
different is our conscious selection process? Like,
Well, but
so,
yeah, so to answer your first question, we're clearly controlling our environment more and more every year, and one of the implications of that is that we're successfully defending ourselves from any selection pressure imposed on us by nature, right? So if you've got bad eyesight, where you once may have just wandered off a cliff, now you
yeah,
have eyeglasses and you don't
yeah,
do that, right? So now we're no longer selecting against bad eyesight in the same way that we
right.
must have been for hundreds of thousands of years. And you can imagine that culture is creating different selection pressures. I mean,
Yes.
all you need is something in the environment that is leading to a differential success in survival and reproduction. So if being
Well,
able to, navigate social media,
right.
defend your reputation based on whatever, whatever receptor densities in the brain that allow you to tweet better or worse. If that is changing the rate of survival and reproduction in any systematic way, well, then that would be a new
Are
selection
you
pressure.
yeah, are you aware of, Will Storr,
Mm-hmm.
the writer? Well, he was saying that, yeah, our selection process, is even before we were human, used to be dominance, violence, and we sort of ruled that out. He basically said that our life is like we're the hero in our narrative. How do we do? How do we get on? And a big thing is a big driving force is
Mm-hmm.
status in a group. We crave status. That's like we can't help it. He said even children fight over a toy they might not want. It's symbolic. Okay. And there's two ways you achieve it. He said one is competence and success. You're good at something, and everyone goes, look at it, look at them, they're good. They're really good for the group, they can be in charge or whatever. And the other one is virtue, where you go, oh, they're kind or they're honest, and that's a selection. We'd have them along, right? And he said, traditionally, when sort of religion came along, suddenly people who weren't good at stuff could still be virtuous because they were Christian or
Mm.
whatever. And he said, with the death of religion, then the next big thing that sort of decided was journalism. That would bring people down a peg or two. He said, because we basically gossip, because that's how we control. We control with gossip. Like in the tribe, you gossip about people and you raise their status behind their back or to
Right.
their face and that. And then we lost touch of that. So these big things took over: religion, organized religion, then journalism. And he said, with the death of those two things, now it's social media.
Mm.
And he said that people have discovered that if they're not good at something, they can raise their status with virtue. And they might not be telling the truth. They can suddenly just say, I'm virtuous. Look at me. I'm better than you. And so people can bring down people who are better than them at something by virtue, and the crowd believes it. And I thought that was fascinating, that to raise your status now, you can just create
Mm-hmm.
this fiction about yourself and say, I'm the best. I'm the best. I'm the most honest. And you bring people down, you virtue signal and bring people down, and it raises your status, which it sort of explained social media to me in like 3
Mm-hmm.
minutes when I heard that. And I sort of knew that intuitively, but I couldn't put it into words. So do you think that's a very significant global process now?
Yeah, well, I think status and the search for status and its maintenance, all of that is a huge variable in society and culture and individual psychology. I mean, it's enormously important, but it's not necessarily directly connected to any ongoing evolutionary process in us because
Oh,
it
no,
only
why
would
not?
be if status were directly correlated with successful breeding and the survival of one's progeny, right? So are people, if you selected for the highest status individuals in our societies, say in the UK and US, and then you asked, well, how many kids are they having on average? I don't know what you'd find, but I wouldn't be surprised to learn that they have fewer on average than lower status people. I don't know.
Right.
It's just that it may be orthogonal to the first point you raised, but as far as the work it's doing in our lives, it's much more of a factor than the imperatives of the genes. I mean, from the point of view of our genes, there is nothing more important than reproducing. But from the point of view of our
Sure.
minds, that's from in your case, you don't have kids, and you're not
Mm.
presumably thinking every moment of the day that you should get busy about this project of having kids. It's the gene's eye view of
So
our
why
lives is
is
is it really doesn't encompass much of our lives.
so why is status so universal? Because he said it's happened before we were human.
Yeah, at the time, and in any kind of primitive society, again, to follow Storr's account here, we're talking about certainly pre-journalism and even pre what we would recognize as religion. Then you're talking about a world in which there is a much larger principle of dominance and displays of dominance. I mean, we're basically social primates where the alpha male or something like the alpha male, the strongest beta males get all of the reproductive opportunities, or certainly most of
Yeah.
them. At a certain point, I mean, certainly once we become language using, then reputation and what can be said about you, or discussed about you in your absence, the scheming that is possible there, all of this is another layer that quickly produces things like culture. But it's still a picture of one's reputation and the fear and respect you can engender in the other primates is the thing that is translating very directly into advantages for the survival of your
And
offspring.
so
So
everything up to that point, before society, so to speak, was literally driven by all these things were an advantage to get you to pass on your genetic material.
yeah,
So it's still so so
insofar as
ego,
one thing I would add here is that there's a plausible account of kind of a parallel track of the evolution of culture that certainly interacts with
yes.
biological evolution in our case, because culture is a context that can impose its own selection pressure. I mean, just to take a crude example, just a cartoonish example, but if you have a culture where any profane outburst is immediately penalized with death, right? If you speak the taboo word Voldemort, anyone around you who hears you will kill you. That's a culture in which something like Tourette syndrome would be completely eradicated, because the moment anyone with Tourette syndrome blurted out a swear word, they'd be killed, right? And so that would be a
I
very
don't think
strong
I'd
selection.
last
But
long, to be honest.
what was that?
I don't think I'd last
Yeah,
long.
exactly. Yeah, but there's definitely an interaction between biology and culture. But culture, as our friend Richard Dawkins pointed out, is a context that evolves by its own Darwinian logic, and he famously coined the meme of the meme,
Yeah.
this notion of the kind of the individual replicators of culture and ideas, which can just propagate themselves in human minds and in human practices. And that's, again,
So
it's a separate layer, but it interacts with the biological evolution.
so why did religion work? Why did people believe it, to the point of the dogma and the blasphemy? Were they forced to believe it? I mean, I assume there's always been atheists,
But
hasn't there?
ask yourself,
So
why does anyone believe anything unsubstantiated now? I mean, we're living in a context where people believe that Bill Gates is putting electrodes in us through the COVID vaccine and tracking us. I mean, it's just they're crazy
yeah,
ideas that spread, and
yeah.
so we're in a situation where there seems to be no good reason for the maintenance of those beliefs.
So does so does eventually the truth comes out. Science works. That's why it survives, because it works. So eventually, everything will be proved
But
right
but
and
but
everything will
what
be proved
we're
wrong.
discovering is that even in the context of valid scientific principles, there's a capacity for a complete breakdown in sense making. There's enough confirmation bias and willful ignorance and dogmatism and tribalism and distrust of other people
Yeah.
and just frank human error that either doesn't get corrected or doesn't get corrected emphatically enough, so that every misstep of real journalists and real scientists gets scored as a fatal flaw in the institutions that produce that information. And so even now, in kind of a fairly late moment in the 21st century, I mean, we're well into this century, we find it incredibly difficult to agree about facts. And so just imagine how hard it would have been in a culture where science isn't even a gleam in the eye of the smartest person, right? It's just like there's no notion of performing an experiment to authenticate anything. There's no recorded media, right? It's just an oral tradition. You just have what your parents told you around a campfire. I mean, it's no surprise that the account of the world would be basically just a tissue of myth and folklore and what could be imagined as some
So,
primitive common sense.
but surely for this to take a hold and humanity to change significantly, and for it to be a world of people who valued opinions over facts, conspiracy theory over, truth. Surely there would have to be something genetic for the type of people who believed in things without evidence and people who didn't believe with things without evidence. Like, so as an atheist and and a flat earther got a different brain. Well, they obviously got a different brain, but is there something tangible to be selected? So do you see what I'm
Mm.
saying? Like,
Yeah, but again, it would have to translate into successful breeding, right? And I
yes,
think if
well, that's
anything, the
true.
trends are going in the other direction. I mean, it does actually fall into the comedic thesis of Mike Judge's film Idiocracy. I don't know if you remember that, but
No, I didn't
he
see that.
imagined a future where the smartest people breed less and less, and the stupidest people breed more and more, and we just get kind of bred into an idiocracy. And it is when you look at just who has 10 kids nowadays? Well, almost by definition, they are religious maniacs, right? By our lights, right? I mean, they're, only fundamentalist religious people of one flavor or another, or only the poorest people in the developing world are condemned to that level of fertility these days. And when you look at the most successful, well-educated, well-informed, committed to tolerance and pluralism, the most cosmopolitan, the most liberal, these people tend to have fewer and fewer kids to the point of not even replacing themselves. I mean, we were talking about cultures where it's now a norm to not achieve the replacement level. So there's a somewhat linear relationship between the secularization of a culture and its economic growth and the loss of fertility. And famously, so you get these horrible details. Like there was a year, pretty recent. I forget what year it was. Something like 2015. There was one year where it was announced that in Japan, finally, the numbers of adult diapers sold were greater than child diapers.
Right.
I mean, that's the end game
Yeah.
for. It's possible that that's the end game for
But
true
hold on though.
secularization and economic development.
But what if? So let's go back to Mike Judge, right?
Mm.
So eventually, the whole world is not as smart, and they believe all these conspiracy theories. Surely that worked. If they're the dominant species, that worked. Evolutionary speaking, it was better to be dumb and believe in the Earth is flat. Do you see what I'm saying?
But it guarantees nothing but fecundity, right? It doesn't guarantee the successful maintenance of civilization. It doesn't guarantee that there'll be anyone left to invent a vaccine that you really need in a pandemic that is 10 times worse than the current one, right? So it's just, you're just talking about masses of people being bred
Yeah.
into each new generation. And then,
But we're imposing our highfalutin, liberal, educated standards to what it is
are
to
you
be
calling me an
human.
elitist?
No, but I'm saying you wouldn't like it, and I wouldn't like it. But they might be really happy. We don't go into an ant colony and go, you're thick, you're thick as shit.
You
Fuck
poor
all of it.
slobs.
You've got.
You
Look at
call
you
that a
fucking eating
queen?
leaves. No, do you know what I mean? Though, because
Helen
at
Mirren's a
the end of the
queen.
day, you just said success is passing on your genetic material,
Yeah,
so they
but
win.
it still could be all headed toward the abyss, right?
Well, we're all headed to the abyss
No, but
anyway.
no, but there's some path here where we maintain the competence required to navigate all that truly threatens us as a species, and
Well,
there are
but
other
hold on
paths where
though.
we fail to do that.
But if it was if it was all people like us, right? That's like us sitting around, right? I can't even fucking work the TV remote,
Right.
right? I doubt you've had a fight in your life, right? So we've got our big throbbing brains, right? We're in our luxury apartments, and then suddenly one of these troglodytes smashes the door down and eats our throat. They eat us, so they win. So
I
so
just have to say, in defense of my own reputation for manliness, at least that exists within my own imagination, I have prepared for the troglodyte coming through the front door to eat my throat.
well,
I'm ready.
well,
I'm ready for
exactly.
him.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, what is it going to be though? A laser gun. I've got a laser gun. Oh
you might need
dear.
a laser gun. Yes.
One of my favorite films, I saw it when I was a kid. I think it's like 1957 or something, and I've watched it, seen it 50
Mm,
times, is, The Time Machine, the original.
yeah. Wait, I
It's
don't know what
just
there's one with
fantastic.
Malcolm McDowell, right? That's not the original?
No, this is who's this guy? Oh, what's his name? Is it might be not Kenneth Moore.
I might even have that wrong. For some reason I put Malcolm McDowell in a H.G. Wells movie. He may never have done one, but
No, I think it might be Kenneth Moore or
mm,
someone like that. I think it's a British actor, and I just absolutely I loved it. It's my favorite theme, time travel,
hmm.
and I don't know why because I clearly know it's impossible, and I wouldn't do anything about it. I wouldn't go if they said you can go back. I go, I can't be bothered. Also, I couldn't work the fucking machine, could I? I'd be going this. I'd be kicking it. I'd going
Wait a minute.
this.
You literally you're sure you would not travel if given the opportunity?
No, because I couldn't trust. I'd be, there'd be me,
I
right?
can't remember if
Uh,
we had this, if we raised this question before, whether you would go to the past or the future.
well, what? So it's all. Oh, we got to get the rules straight, though. We've got to get the. What is going to the past? Is it me? Is it my? Is it my mortal, fleshy, flabby body? It's really me. Can I
Oh,
die?
we did.
Can I? If I squish,
Now I
if I
remember.
wait,
I remember we did talk about this because we
wait.
agreed that
What?
the measure of one's technical and scientific ignorance was that a comic. I can't remember if it's Nate Bargatze or Joe List, but one of them has a joke that he's so ignorant of science and so technically incompetent that if he went 100 years in the past, he would not be able to convince anyone he was from the future.
Exactly. I wouldn't know how to show them.
Exactly.
I'd say things like microwave and they go, what? I go, nothing, nothing. Don't worry about it. But just put the flames
All
good.
right.
Also, I'd sort of agree with them because I quite like the idea of like everything being practical again.
All
But
right, but
so I don't,
you have one, you've got a time machine with two buttons, and one button
right.
goes 100 years into the past, and another
Yeah.
goes 100 years into the future, and you have to press one, and it's you as you are now going to one of those places in our
So it
world.
doesn't matter that I'm dead in 100 years.
Right?
I've put my, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which
So do
do
I,
you bet on the
a few
future,
more
or do
questions.
you bet on the
Well,
past?
first, I've got lots of questions. Right, in the future, do I go? So I go and find out exactly what happened, including my fate. I can
Hmm.
look up today. 2025. Ricky Gervais.
Presumably, if in fact you did go to the future, what you would find is Ricky Gervais disappeared mysteriously on the present date 100 years ago. No one knows what happened to him. He just left a unfinished beaker of red wine and a
Yeah,
couple of
but
aspirin in his green
yeah,
room.
no. Okay, so I wouldn't. So if I went to the future though, and then came back
No,
and
no,
then carried on my
you're not.
life, yeah.
You can't come back. It's a one-way trip either to the past or the future.
Oh,
You got to live the rest of your biological endowment, such as it is, in the past
oh
or the future.
God.
And
What
you get to
about all
keep the
the stuff
clothes.
about
For better or worse, you get to keep the clothes that you're wearing. So pick a good pair of
right,
shoes.
okay, right, okay. So I arrive fashionably,
Yeah,
right? Whatever that is, I
yeah,
arrive. Okay, I go. I'm in a little silver onesie. I go back. I'm a Victorian gentleman. Whatever.
right.
I have no status other than what I can make of
Yeah,
myself.
just your wits.
I have just my wits, right? My name's Ricky Gervais. No one's heard of me. I've got no whatever, right? We don't
I'll
know what
give
the
you some American Express travelers checks. Do you remember those?
yeah, right. I've got yeah. So
You got
okay,
travelers
right,
checks from 1987.
okay. Right. Okay. Wait. No. No. I'd have gold. I'd have gold coins, wouldn't I?
Okay.
I'd have gold coins of the value of the. Have I got any money? I've got no money. I got no money. I've got a right. What's the best for me? And there's no. Yeah. All my friends and family either not born yet or they're all
Exactly.
dead. So that's equal. My intuitively, what's best for me, and without knowing anything, although I do know about the past,
Mm.
I do know about. Surely that's a massive advantage to
Yeah.
know. But as you say, what could I do with it? So I wouldn't have a better life 100 years ago, even though I'd be the most. I could become the most successful man in the world 100 years ago, but it
Mm.
wouldn't be as good as my life now because of all the good things that are around now. So taking that forward, I'd have a massive disadvantage in the future. But presumably, wherever I landed, politics
Right.
aside or whatever, it must be I'd gamble on a better standard of living. I couldn't work the lights, but I don't know what they would be. You just think, what? You just think to bring the lights on.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
I'm
it's interesting. One,
thinking.
like going to the past is really a bet on yourself, right? And your
Yeah,
ability to prevail over the ignoramuses of 100 years ago. And going to the
yeah.
future is a bet on the future. It's a bet on society, a society that will be much better than the current one, if in fact you believe that's likely.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you don't know the hazards of either, do you? But you know that if you cut your leg open 100
They'll,
years
they'll,
ago,
they'll be able to solve that problem in the future.
yeah,
If you think, I mean, unless you think civilization's going to unravel in the meantime. I think if you're long humanity, if you think we're generally going to tend in the direction of progress, I think you have to bet on the future.
well, I thought of another thing as well, that this would tell what type of person we are, is that do you want to fascinate the world or be fascinated by the world?
Hmm.
Because I could go back and presumably be the most fascinating person if I remembered
If
how to
if if you
make
remember
something.
anything,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do they believe me, or are we assuming you got to keep it quiet because everyone thinks
the,
you're mad and we don't know what?
well,
Does anyone? Can I tell the story? I just have to keep quiet about where I've come from, do I? Or what?
that strikes me as that's a very comic asymmetry here. So if you go to the past, you can convince people you're from the future because you can say things, provided you remember anything of history, you can say things that would be impossible to predict with accuracy, and you'll be borne out. I mean, like if you went to you'd be able to predict the onset of World War II, or whatever it is, any relevant dates, you'd be able to just nail them the day
Yeah,
before.
but
But if you
how
go to
long
the
have they got to
future,
wait?
there's nothing credible to say about your coming from the past, but for the fact that
No,
you don't know anything. It's
no.
synonymous with essentially with brain damage.
Yeah, yeah. You can't prove you don't know stuff,
Exactly. Just you.
and knowing stuff is no advantage because they go, yeah, we know that too. It's on Google that's in our heads now. We've got a little chip in our brains, right? So
You're
yeah,
just in the
hold on.
future. You're just a moron. That's it.
I don't know that you can. I don't know that you can confidently go back and prove it. Just think of that. Think of you. So you go back to 1921, right? You're you now.
If I could
You're
remember the
Sam Harris.
date of the stock market crash, which I
Well,
can't.
that would make you
I would
rich, but
remember
they
the
just
year, but
but
I was like, wait a minute, it's somewhere. It's the fall of 1929. Isn't that when everything goes haywire? I would be
yeah, but hold on, you gotta wait 9 years to be proved right here. What are you doing until then? They're just going, "He's an idiot. He thinks he's from the future," but
presumably buying a lot of stock before and getting ready to sell.
yeah, but also we're not even talking about the time-space continuum where anything you say will have an effect.
Right. Yes.
So you could be wrong. So you predicting something, the fact that you've said it and that
Yeah.
rumble means it doesn't
I'm gonna
happen.
keep my cards very close to the vest until I can profit from them, and then breed in spectacular fashion.
I think because life is so precious, and we're eventually we're going to we've presumably got our biological life, whatever that is, which may be longer in the future. So if everyone's living to 120, that's giving me more. I think I've got to go to be fascinated and
Mm.
a nobody, but be fascinated with the world, as opposed to go back and telling people buy Microsoft shares. Right? I don't think that's a good gig. I would. I would also. It would feel like I was cheating, and people would annoy me.
Mm.
They just annoy me because, I don't know. I'd say, hasn't anyone got deodorant? You all
Yeah.
stink.
Yeah. When was that invented? That's a
I
good
don't
point.
know, but I'd say
When
that's
does the past start to smell okay?
the past stinks. The past would absolutely stink. It would. It would. Also, where are we landing? Am I? Do we choose? I assume I'm in
I
London
think it's got to be
when.
like the Time Machine movie where you just wind up in the very room
Yeah, you drag it
where the
out.
machine
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
So yeah. So 1921. What's that? That's the Roaring Twenties. So decadent. What's that? So just before.
I
Oh
assume it was
yeah.
like that in the UK as well, but Yeah, in America there was a lot of intemperate what the hell is the word?
Jesus
Intemperate
Christ. If you're having a stroke, what's
intemperate.
going on?
I think there's a syllable in there that I'm forgetting.
Right. Okay. That's the trailer. That's the trailer. That's the fucking hell. Jesus Christ. No, I'll tell you what I could do though. I'll tell you what I do remember. I'd remember like Stan and Ollie routines. I could rip them off. I could just
Right.
stitch them
Yes.
right up.
They would probably kill you for just IP theft.
But they wouldn't know because they
you'd be
thought they wouldn't
stealing their
even have thought
material as they were thinking of it.
before them. Before they I would just there would be movie cameras. I'd go, I've got an idea. I've got an idea for a
Mhm.
film, and I just just keep ripping them off. Yeah. I'd feel guilty about that. I couldn't live it. It's the future. It's going to the future and living out probably a miserable but fascinating last 50 years. I'm giving myself an extra 50 because I think that'd be a no-brainer. I'd
Yeah,
definitely in the future I'd definitely make it to 110.
no doubt.
Good. Well, we've sorted that out. God. What a load of bollocks that was. Right, you trying to say that word was bizarre because I thought, well, he's going to give up or he's going to say, let's
Intemperate.
edit that.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet the word
Oh,
temperance is so easy. Just
yeah,
yeah.
I know. Well done.
Yes.
Good, we got there in the end.